Is this the Sony marketing department? This is David Osler.
Oh, hi Dave. Really love your show.
Oh, thanks for saying that, actually. I really appreciate it. That's not why I'm calling up, though. I'm actually calling up to ask what are you going to do about the Sony firmware releases that basically we're not getting. What I wanted to call about was the fact that Nikon have given just an incredible firmware update. In fact, it's almost like a new camera, and I'm just a little bit disappointed that you guys just haven't been doing that. So have you got anything to say about that? Okay, so obviously nothing. All right, goodbye. Okay, so what this is really about is the fact that I think Sony could be doing much better with their firmware updates. In fact, I think once a company gets to the top of their game, and as we know, Sony are leading the mirrorless market with Canon, but they seriously are not releasing many updates at all on their cameras, and I think it's become a bit of an issue. And eventually it may affect users because they might, say, move to another platform. Now, what I'm talking about here is that there has been some fairly big updates on the Canon side. Panasonic has always had big firmware updates. Nikon have just released a massive firmware update with the Nikon Z9, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. But really, we've had nothing on the Sony side of things. Well, when I say nothing, there's been nothing substantial. And in fact, if you look at the A7S III, what they've done with that is terrible, in fact. If you look at the A7 IV, it's got features in it that even their flagship camera like the A7S III hasn't got. Things like the focus breathing fix that's in that camera, some of the focus features that you see in that camera as well, the focus assist features, and things like that just haven't been added onto the A7S III, and really it's inexcusable, really, if you're talking about that. What they're doing is they're forcing you to buy another camera, which is quite... Look, I can understand why they're doing it, but I also think it's silly. They really should be sort of putting those features back in to those cameras. I remember the A7 III, you never got the change in the color icon for your focus. The A9, there was sort of promises early on that we would get picture profiles with that, and even the A9 II, it's never happened. These are things that Sony are holding back on, and I think it's a very, very bad marketing strategy, in fact. And I think once companies like Nikon start to produce these amazing firmware updates, similar to what like Panasonic have done and things like that, it might end up eventually hurting Sony. So I am hoping that Sony does listen to this and starts to give us some meaningful firmware updates. Now, it doesn't really affect sales because there hasn't been that many releases in cameras anyway, and I don't think that adding some of these smaller updates, say to the A7S III, is going to affect their sales when a new A7S IV comes out. But let me talk about the Nikon update first, and I'll sort of tell you why I think this is so big. So if you're looking at it here, it says that the Nikon Z9 update is so big it could have been a whole new camera. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I'll leave this link down below, but I just wanted to talk to you about this. It's saying that it's about to get a lot more power thanks to a free firmware update that adds in-camera 12-bit RAW video up to 8K 60 frames per second, oversample 4K 60 frames per second, and it says a pre-release photo capture button and things like that as well. I'm going to take you through some of the things that they're talking about upgrading through this as well. It's the Firmware 2 update. And it's saying, like I said before, it can catch a 12-bit internal RAW in a range of frame rates. The footage can now be captured up to 8.3K at 60 frames per second. It's also got this red outline that you can see through here when you're recording. Now, this is absolutely a game changer. I had this on the Panasonic GH5 that I had, and I loved it. Having a waveform is brilliant because it's by far the best way you can check your exposure, and they're giving you that feature on the Nikon, and that, for me alone, if I had the money, I seriously would consider buying this camera. That's just such a great feature. I often put monitors on. I'm using the Ninja V to get that feature sort of added on. So that's such a great tool as well. It just says here, a new dedicated video info display gives various video recording settings at a glance, such as frame size and rate, audio settings, codec, bit depth, and HDMI output settings. 4 other video features are also coming to the Z9. A fine ISO control mode enables exposure adjustment increments up to 1/6 EV. A fast AF on function allows the user to assign different AF speeds to separate controls, from slow rack focus to fast transition, and I'll talk more about some of these a little bit later, I think, in this. To enable slow shutter video recording of extremely dark scenes or intentionally induced blur when shooting video in M mode, the shutter speed can be set a lot slower than the 1 frame rate, but it doesn't stop with just software improvements. Nikon has also revealed new plans to release a new camcorder style grip, and that's the grip that's actually here. Now they're saying also for photographers, it's had huge performance gains for video shooters, but for photographers they haven't been forgotten. To start with, Nikon is adding pre-release capture feature that says it will make it easier for photographers to nail fast moving subjects. So in other words, it's going to grab it before and also after you finish doing the shutter, which is great because sometimes you do miss things right before you press that shutter or afterwards. Now the focus modes, it's saying here that it's also adding 20 types of custom wide area AF selection patterns, which gives photographers more control over the part of the frame they want to focus on, as shown below. So in other words, you can just select certain areas, and you can do that with 20 different patterns that they've actually got. There's also a stack of other features too that you can read about here. The firmware upgrade is free and it will be available from April the 20th. Good on Nikon for doing this. And I think Sony could learn from this. The problem is at the moment, to get anything that's even a decent upgrade, you're going to have to buy a new camera. I can understand that from a marketing perspective, but also I think Sony should be looking after their customers a little bit better and giving us more features. Like I said, having features in the A7 IV that we haven't even, and video features like that focus breathing that we haven't even got in the flagship A7S III, it's just silly, and I think they should be adding those sort of things. Let me know your opinion about this down below. I'd love to know what you think, and apart from that, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.